Who is it? You or us?
You guys got this one.
Oh, that's just the whole thing. Come on, you can't tease me like that.
Are we ready?
Yeah.
All right. Good evening. Thanks for coming. Tonight we have, we're going to have two guests actually tonight. The first guest we have is Fritz Odenbach. We've been talking to him for several weeks now about possibly coming in and talking to you and giving you a little background of, you know, he's had the property now for what, almost 2 years?
No, it's 4 years in May.
That long, really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Time flies.
So he's had the property for 4 years. Obviously, they've been doing some things over there to improve what was there. We'll talk a little bit about that, and a little bit about the fire and what came out of the fire, and just a little bit informally about what you might like to do in the future with the site and what your plans are.
Okay.
Let's roll.
You ready?
Yeah,
All
let's do
right.
it.
Just for all of you who don't have the whole history of Shadow Lake, our family, the Odenbach family, as part of the original Dolomite, the Odenbach Dolomite, built the golf courses in 1978. Was Shadow Lake. That was when golf was at a real boom, and back then, kind of a funny story. My dad was pretty conservative. He's like, well, let's just build a little trailer, we'll sell some hot dogs, and that's about it, right? Well, so as you can see, Shadow Lake Clubhouse has developed from there. So that was in 1978. With the push in golf, we decided we built Shadow Pines in 1985, built Greystone in 1996, and then we sold the company to Old Castle in 2000, and then most of our family, my immediate family, continued to work for Old Castle and run the golf courses and everything. So in 2015, Dolomite Old Castle wanted to sell the golf courses. My brothers bought Greystone, and I purchased Shadow Lake in 2016, in May 2016, with my ex-neighbor from out in Webster, Gary Hasley, and we gave him a couple beers, so we talked him into it. So anyways, we've run it since then, completely separate from Dolomite. I retired from Dolomite in 2017 after 40-something years, and it's been great. Beautiful place, we love it. Unfortunately, we had a misfortune, had a fire in October of 2018, and what I thought was going to be 2 weeks to fix was 6 months to fix, and we decided to do it the right way and make some renovations, repaint everything, some new furniture, new flooring, and I'm not sure how many of you people have been there before and after the fire, but it's, as Jim, you could say, it's quite different, and we're pretty proud of it, and we're pretty excited about it, and we're going to continue to put more effort into keeping it up to date. It was the first renovation in 20 years, that was, and but things have been really well received. We're very excited. We have over 65 weddings this year, and a total of over 500 events.
Wow.
You know, from showers to baptisms to all sorts of things. So we're pretty excited about putting some money into the golf course, dropping trees now. We're, so so we're here to stay, and this has been my dream, and trying to make my dad proud. He passed away a bunch of years ago, but this was his absolute love. And one of the stories on Shadow Lake, all the cart paths are just wide enough for his car to fit down there, because he wanted to drive around and have his clippers and
Full
all the
access.
trees up, full access of it and everything. So we're pretty proud of it. And again, the golf course is in the best shape it's probably been in since we first couple of years we owned it. It's really in great shape. Unfortunately, the game of golf is slowly taking a turn down, so we're trying to put money back into it to keep, you know, and hopefully, not that you want people to go out of business, but hopefully the golf world will dry up a little bit. Having Shadow Pines closed actually helped Shadow Lake, because there just wasn't enough to keep all of our 3 golf courses going, and to make it a profitable business, it's really difficult. Webster closing has helped us a little bit as far as keeping our numbers up and our leagues up. So we're here to stay. There's not 1 ounce of our effort that's going to be put into developing this, because I want to hand this down to my sons and daughters, and, we love it. Everybody loves it. We're getting entertainment on Friday night, so we're here to stay. The golf course is here to stay. We had an opportunity, if we ever weren't gonna put money back into it, after the fire was the time just to patch it up and like, okay, but no, we did a full-on renovation, painted everything, replaced as much as we could, and so I figure I'll let you ask some questions. I figure you guys might have some questions on it, but that's a quick history. And we have the paddle tennis, which is one of the most popular places in the U.S. here in Rochester per capita. We have probably 700 men that play on Thursday nights and 800 women that play on Monday nights around town, but Shadow Lake has the most courts of the people in town. So that's been a real priority for us in the wintertime in our off-season. Like Greystone's doing tubing now, which they're having a great run of it now. We just try to find things that keep us busy in the off-season. And paddle tennis has been a big one for us. Yeah, so that's about it. So we're excited. We're trying to figure out ways to get a driving range out there. It's a little tricky. We're a little tight on room, believe it or not, and access. But yeah, so if anybody has any questions, we're pretty proud of it and pretty happy of it, and plan on being there as long as I can. So if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them.
Any other long-term off-season plans or thoughts at this point?
No, not little things, but we took away 2 of the volleyball courts, which was kind of a headache for us, and we had a couple lawsuits on that over the years. So we took those out and we grassed it over. Yeah, well, actually one was
Those
from.
were fun. I used to play there. Those were
I know,
fun.
I did too, when I could jump more.
Oh yeah, that was why I stopped playing. I couldn't jump high enough to get over the net.
It's bad sand, I guess. So we grassed that over, and we're thinking of maybe when we have a couple of these big golf events where we need an extra tent to put up there besides the one we have, we might move it over there by the paddle courts, by where the tennis courts were. Nothing major though. We're trying to figure out a way to get a driving range in there in case we ever shut down part of the executive course. We have a 9-hole executive course, which, say what you want, it still gets a lot of play, and a lot of the people you want to get out to golf, the youth, the mother, daughter, father, son, that kind of groups, elderly, they play this 9-hole course, which is easy, and so it's tough to, you might get rid of that. So we just, little things like that. We always have wild ideas of like, hey, let's get a hotel here. I'm like, yeah, right, sure. No, it's just too much headaches. But so far so good. We got a great crew and a great management we have. We're very proud of them, and we're doing, knock on wood, we're keeping it busy, and the renovations really help keep it fresh. Just to let some of the numbers are pretty crazy. Last Easter we did 400 people for Easter dinner, and Mother's Day we did 500 people. So things are good that way. We're trying to figure out how to make money at it, but yeah. So nothing major. I think all our renovations are done for a while, and just more stuff like clearing out trees, paving the parking lot. Nothing exciting.
When you guys opened, I spent the whole summer, when I must have been 14 or 15, on my knees on the fairways picking up rocks.
That's a big thing.
We formed a whole line. You actually crawl down the fairways. I'll never forget that.
We all did it. Yeah, I know. All our family and my dad were like, let's go to the golf course. And then it was a trick.
Pick up rocks.
Fell for it every time.
No golf.
Yeah, it's 200 acres at a time picking little rocks. They keep you busy, right?
Well, my question is, if the town was to approach you to change the zoning for that property, something other than single family, what would your guys' reaction be?
We don't have a problem with it. Not at all, because I'm with you. I don't want to see 250 homes there like Shadow Pines. I don't want to go through anything like that. I'd love to work with the town on it, but there's a value, I feel, that we purchased Shadow Lake. We probably overspent for it from Dolomite, but we always had this in the back of our minds, like, hey, the land's worth this. So at the worst, if we can't make it as a golf course and restaurant, you have some value there. So that would be the only concern, is the value of whatever type of zoning it's changed to, I guess.
We
Does
even
that make
talked-
sense?
And we did talk about the idea, Doc, over recently and over the years. One of the things we looked at was the use of incentive zoning, whereby they would be able to preserve certain areas or some areas of the property.
Like the executive course or something.
Well, even, it depends on whatever it would be. It would depend on them coming with a plan, but providing them with some higher density in a confined area so they could get the number of units that they would be entitled to, but maybe do it, in a vertical type setting, and then allowing the rest of the property so they could still get their return on the property, their true value return on the property, but then allow the rest of it to remain open. Or a good chunk of it to remain open.
Yeah, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about that because honestly, we don't have any plans to even think about developing. I want to make it as a golf course and restaurant, and a banquet house, weddings, and,
It sounds like this is the time to make a deal then.
yeah, maybe. I don't know.
How do your children feel about it, Fritz? I mean, 'cause
My
a lot
children?
of- Well,
Oh.
because a lot of families, family I'm very familiar with,
Uh-huh.
where the parents really built the business and the aunts and uncles, everybody was in, and then that next generation, they all kind of started working there, but then they just
Yeah, well,
went off in their own directions.
I have 2 stepchildren and 2 of my kids. My 2 kids they love it, thrilled about it. They frequent the place a lot. They do not work there. But my partner and I have a rule that no family members can work there. Because we just didn't want like all my family flooding the Shadow Lake Market and my partner's kids not having anything to do with it. So, but they love it. And I honestly think my son is actually, I can't say that. My daughter's as interested as my son. And they're pretty psyched. They're pretty proud of it. They're always over there. And my stepdaughter is very involved. She used to work in the snack bar. My daughter used to work there back in the old days. But no, they're pretty psyched, and I think they'd be happily take it over. But I told them I'm not going easy. So I'm going to be around for a while. So sorry if that answers that.
Any other questions?
You said you were also working on the golf course itself? Improvements to that, or obviously reinvesting money into the
Yeah,
course?
a lot of it's with trees because we planted all those trees that are on the golf course
Starting to
back in
see those-
19...
The pines are starting to reach
Yeah.
their life
Well, the ones
cycle.
along the road, yeah, we planted
Yeah.
those also back in the mid-'70s, not knowing there was going to be a golf course back there, but then it all happened. All the trees in the golf course are virtually all the ones that we planted, and they just have gotten so big. That course, if any of you guys have played it back in the day, back in the 70s and 80s, it was a relatively open, easy course. You can cut corners, you can go over trees that were only 5-6 foot tall. Not anymore. Honestly, the biggest complaint we have is, when are you going to cut some trees down? It's so narrow. Which I kind of like. I don't want to make it too easy, but that's one of the big things, the trees. We got a tree guy there, arbor tree there now, taking out key trees to kind of open up a couple greens to breathe a little bit better, open up a couple fairways. Nothing major, but pretty big. And then it's just more we took a huge tree on number 9. As you look out from the clubhouse over the lake, there was a big willow. It was like as big as this whole area right here. Just took that down last week, and that really is going to open that view up. And so little things that probably no one will ever even notice, except for me.
The people who
And your
constantly hit the
father.
trees.
And my father, yes, yes.
So Fritz, when that was first done, that was actually a quarry itself,
Yes, back in the 1920s.
So
yeah.
was your dad, I know there was a lot of stuff going on with kids going out there and messing around and doing
Yeah.
things. Was that one of the driving factors to try and stop that from happening and kind of creating the golf course? Was
Yes.
an alternative?
Well, it's a quick history. That was started in 1920s, before we opened the one across the street in Penfield. And my grandfather started that, and he was renting the land or paying a royalty of, I think it was 10 cents a ton. Every ton he sold, he had to give the farmer who owned the land, 10 cents per ton. And the guy doubled his price one year, and so my grandfather said, okay, sorry, we're moving. We moved across the street to the Penfield quarry, which is our second oldest quarry. The Gates one is, I say we, like I'm still part of it. But, the Gates quarry was 1920, so it's 100 years old this year. So we ended up buying the land, I think in the 60s, my dad did, or the company did. And then we started, it was a big swimming hole, as most of you know the story back there. It was a huge swimming hole, whether it's Baird Road or 5 Mile Line Road. Cars were lined up, people were back there. And not a lot of clothes were had back then, evidently. So, and we had I think there was a couple drownings, 2, I think, Jim?
Yep.
2 drownings there. So we had to put security guards on there. It just got to be a real pain. And then my dad and Dolomite came to the town of Penfield and wanted to put a townhouse project around the lake. And it got turned down. I can't remember what year that was, Jim. It was probably,
Before I was there.
yeah, well, and probably early 70s. It got turned down. So my dad came up with the idea of like, hey, let's put a public golf course in. And we're like, hey, okay, we like that. Better than being in the bottom of a quarry all day shoveling and driving a quarry truck. Sure, let's try that. So that was the quick history, and yeah.
I
That's what
had
it-
heard that Irene Gosson, and maybe it was with your father, had a conversation that, did your dad want to open a golf course down more toward Penfield Road? And she said, why don't you take it up there instead, and it'll solve the big
I don't remember that.
water problem or something?
I don't remember that, but the piece is probably talking about is down by the old Redmond quarry down
Yeah, yeah.
off of Old Penfield Road. But there's no room, there wouldn't be any room there. There wouldn't have been any room for housing. Well, maybe back then though, I shouldn't say that.
No, but
Before it
to
was,
start a golf course, no.
right,
to have a golf
but
course.
before it was dredged,
Yeah.
before it was a big lake down there, it might have been.
Mhm.
It was probably back in the late 60s, or early
Yeah,
70s.
yeah, it would've been the 70s,
And
early 70s.
before we mined that all out and made it a big lake down there, there was probably a lot of land. I never heard that story. It could be true though.
Yeah, I've kind of heard.
Yeah,
People probably knows the story better.
yeah, that's, a lot of years go by. Yeah. But no, we're pretty proud of it, and just gonna do our best to make it better. And that quarry, that little, the water in the quarry over there, right there, yep. That, we have a deal with Dolomite, that was part of the deal when we bought it. Whenever, that's our water, that's where we get our water from. When our pond, our lake, the level goes down to a certain point where you can't pump anymore and you just gotta wait till it rains. Instead of buying public water, we pump it over from the quarry. And that was almost a deal breaker for us, because Old Castle Dolomite did not want anybody from the outside in their quarries. Not they're hiding anything, they just
Yeah.
didn't want, for accidents, something happening. Yeah, liability. So there's pumps, it used to pump Shadow Pines, and there's a pump that went across to the west to Shadow Pines, and then there's one that goes right across to, feeds right into our lake.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's gone dry one
Underground
time.
piped over?
Yeah, it's piped over, goes up the walls of the pond. The one goes on the east, crosses underneath 5 Mile Line Road, and then goes all the way up right through directly into our pond. So we use that probably, 4 or 5 times a year, and probably one time, I want to say it was like 5 or 6 years ago, we had a really dry summer, and that pond on the left dried up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it dried up, and it was like, okay, what do we do now?
I was gonna
So,
say, that's not good.
yeah,
I
we're
was-
very lucky. Because it's huge. You buy public water for that amount, thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons. It's quite a bit.
I always assumed that once the pumps were turned off, that it would start filling up the quarry again, but maybe that's not necessarily true.
They have pumps everywhere else. This one they they leave it full because that water also washes this just to the north right there. There's a little plant there, a processing plant,
Yep.
and that makes washed stone. Most of the stone is not washed, but they make washed 1s and 2s about the size of a dime and a quarter, and that goes in our concrete. You have to have washed product. You can't have all dust. So that water also supplies the water to rinse off the stone, and then they keep it full and then pump it over the. I'm trying to think if you can see the bottom right of the pond. There's a little house down there, a little
shed
pump
right there
house
with the
there.
shadow?
Yep. Down a little bit, no, down on the inside,
Right there.
yeah, right there. Yeah, that's where it comes up the wall there and then
I can see the.
goes out, and then if you go along the wall of the quarry to the right there, I think it goes right up there. Right up the wall and out.
That's nice.
See what little things you find out?
I never knew that.
You gotta go through the wall. They're probably
Yeah, 'cause
fence.
these drop
But there was one in Shadow Pines also, they used to feed Shadow Pines also.
into the ground.
That one I knew about. I
Yeah,
didn't know about this one.
yeah. Yeah, it's a necessity
Pretty
because
cool.
we would not survive a summer without it because,
A lot of water in that quarry.
yeah.
But what do you do if you have a dry summer and Dolomite wants to wash their gravel?
Oh, it's a problem. We had
Yeah.
it, I'm gonna say 6 years ago. I think it was before we owned it. And they got really, because my brother used to run the golf course then, and it was nip and tuck as far as the golf course, and they actually pumped water from that other pond to the left, upper left, yeah, into this pond just to keep it going for a little bit. I mean, normally in the wintertime, like you let the pumps go, we pump 1 million gallons a day out into Arundecoy Creek, I think it is. Yeah.
Well, indirectly, yeah.
Yeah.
It comes out in the corner
Yeah.
below,
Goes in the hip brook and.
Yeah, so a lot of water comes out of there.
down in this corner here.
Like the Walworth quarry will let go, the pumps, we'll turn the pumps off for a few months in the wintertime, and it's amazing how fast it fills up.
Do you think that quarry would ever fill up again if the pumps were turned off, or would it just not get to the top?
It'd fill up, I'm gonna say it would fill up about 3/4 of the way,
Yeah, that's,
yeah. I would guess, that's my understanding, and other abandoned quarries, I've seen that, it gets to a certain point above the water table,
yeah,
and
it doesn't go.
and it just doesn't go any higher, but it fills up quick though. Fills up quick, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. I'm trying to think what else, nothing else, just, the key in our business is keeping the people we've had, we have a lot of long-time employees, our manager, our events coordinator, and it's,
Oh, one other thing though, is you notice that there are townhouses along there on Shadow Pines Drive. They actually, I can't remember how many they built. I want to say, for some reason, I want to say 29, but I could be
I was
wrong.
gonna say 27, so it's probably 29, you're probably
It's
right.
been a long time since, but there was actually a third section that was gonna be built. You guys held off on doing it.
Was that the one
It's
that
been
goes up to the
approved.
left,
Yeah,
up
it
through
keeps
there?
going to your left, and
Yeah.
I think your dad determined that it was gonna interfere with a golf game.
Yeah, there's some pretty bad golfers out there.
So
We
we
had a couple neighbors down, my dad used to live there, but we had a couple neighbors who, you figure you move to a golf course, you like the game of golf, or you like to look out and see the golf course versus other homes and stuff like that. Oh, people put signs up, beware of dogs, stay off, property, private property. Why do you live there?
Yeah.
And you get an occasional broken window there, but going up that little feather up through the woods there, up towards the pond, it really, it's pretty narrow there. It's pretty rough, it would take a lot of work.
They would have lost all the trees probably.
Yeah.
Those trees
We use
weren't,
it as, we have a
they
little.
weren't there that, they weren't over there now.
We have, we're at the end of the condos there, where it just starts in the woods, that we have a little, you need dump sites from all the trees, the branches, and
Yeah.
excess dirt. You can just see it's just started there, but it's pretty big right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of water there too. I remember during the ice storm, those basements in those places were flooded when the power
Oh, were
was
they?
up for so long.
Yeah.
I get the memory of one of them that had like 2 sump pump cracks in there and it was just pouring in there.
They had the old concrete walls we put in there too. There weren't many back in the day. Everybody used to block walls, and we put concrete walls.
Right. Well, they don't call it Dolomite for nothing.
I was saying, there's,
Oh yeah,
there's
there's
bedrock
rock there. There's rock. Believe me, if you're gonna dig anything, you're gonna pay for it. Actually, that quarry, the Penfield quarry and the Walworth quarry, are probably 2 of the top-rated quarries in all of New York State. As far as ease of getting to the stone, you don't have to go over all the overburden. A lot of places you'll go 20, 30, 40 feet to get down to the rock. This one, I think Penfield's got, if it's 10 feet, it's a lot. There's not much, but you can see we're getting to the extreme.
Well, we know some people have said they just took a broom to the surface and they found the rock, so.
Pretty much. But there's a whole vein, I mean, all the way from Buffalo through, my cousin Rick would tell you this, he's a geologist, but there's a vein of dolomite stone it's just right at the surface, which usually it goes kind of up and down.
How many years do you think they have left in
This one, to be honest with you, there's not a lot of room, so they're making this a higher price quarry, like our Gates quarry, because that was the oldest one. They'll keep it going. They probably have 5, maybe 10 years of good hard stone, the top level for concrete and asphalt. But like where that bottom left where the water is and all those lower levels, that's all for road base for crusher run. And that, they have probably 50 years of that. And then meanwhile, what they'll do is all our jobs, even like a job at 5 Mile Lane Road in Atlantic Avenue that's coming up next year, the stone and the asphalt on that will probably come from Walworth, not here, even though it's only a half a mile away. Because that's the price difference between the quarries now. In Walworth, we have an unlimited, we have 80 to 100 years supply of stone out there, good quality stone.
So the prices are different?
Yes, yes. Otherwise, you'd be sold out and you'd be dried up and you'd have no, so you just gotta kind of, go along. Because the location in Penfield, as you can appreciate, like our golf course location is great, but to do projects around the Penfield area and further, to have something right there, it costs a lot of transportation and trucking and, when you're so close to a job, you only put 2 or 3 trucks on it. When you're coming in from Walworth, you have to put 7 or 8, but you make up for it in the cheaper stone. So they kind of weigh it so it kind of evens out in the long run, but.
Still a lot of asphalt generated out of this
Yes.
as well. I mean, you have
Yes.
Walworth stone, but it's
Yes.
asphalt generated at this plant.
Yep,
So they're bringing a lot of stone in from
Walworth.
right?
Walworth and believe it or not, our Leroy plant.
Really?
Yeah. Because it's really cheap for us to produce it out there. And even though it's a long haul in, but it is what it is. But like Leroy hauls into Gates to keep that going, and it's kind of a big puzzle, but you gotta do it, otherwise these scores would be,
We
Yes,
grew up
probably like
on,
it
we
shut
grew up
down,
on
but-
Colonial.
what's that?
We grew up on Colonial and there's more often than not a broken window or two when you guys were blasting, so.
It's funny you say that because we used to get complaints all the time. We had a guy in the office who would call all the neighbors within an X mile radius, say, okay, we're blasting at noon today, we're blasting at this today. And it's the air blast that actually causes some of what feels like everything's shaking. But
I can feel it.
all the crack, you can go to any other town 40 miles away from Dolomite or any other quarry, and you're gonna have cracks in the walls. You're gonna have the same things you do here. So a lot of things, yours is probably a broken one. You probably had maybe there was a rock that flew there. Was it a rock or just broken from the?
It used to happen quite a bit.
Yeah.
Almost more across the street because those houses backed up a lot closer to the quarry.
Yeah. Right on Colonial, right there, yeah. Yeah, I used to hear some stories.
And the
from
trees
that.
are a lot smaller too.
Yes.
And you guys weren't as deep, so it seemed like.
No,
you had more.
you definitely
Yeah.
feel, especially when it's cloud cover and stuff like that, that's when you really feel like it's a lot louder. My dad used to tell me all the stuff back in the day, that some of the blasts they used to have would send a few rocks in the air to neighbors' houses before all the true safety measures come into effect. Oh, gosh, yeah.
That's really interesting.
And yet, oh, sorry, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say that left quadrant, Shadow Pines back 9, you'll notice that's obviously more hilly than the front 9 of Shadow Pines. And that's because every time, to take all the spoil, all the dirt above the rock, we had to haul it somewhere. That was always hauled across the street for year after year after year after year. And anytime, when I used to drive quarry truck there back when I was 16 or 17, a couple of years ago, and every time the plant broke down, they'd just send us up to where the face was, and they would load us up with dirt and bring it over never knowing it was going to be a golf course, but it makes it quite a difference from the front 9 because of the topography. Yeah. So that's why you see the big hills over there in the back 9.
Did that topography fall off closer to Wayland than it does now? Was the grade change that much, or did it was
Originally, you mean?
Yeah.
I think to the right, that little line that goes down the middle, everything to the right there, yes. That's everything we brought in. I think the rest was pretty it kind of falls off towards the
Yeah.
creek down there and stuff. I think that was pretty much virgin soil. I don't think we messed with that. It's
Right.
everything to the right of that line, pretty much.
Okay.
So, yeah, kind of interesting.
That's interesting, yeah.
Some things you don't know.
You had a question?
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, kind of a little bit of an elephant in the room question. So you have a lawsuit against the town
Mhm.
now because of the moratorium. How is that going? Does it look like it's coming to a resolution, or?
I don't know how it's going, to be honest with you, because, and I'm the last person in the world that ever want to do a lawsuit, but I'm just gonna be honest with you here, we thought we were unfairly treated, and treated the same way Shadow Pines was, even though we had nothing to do with Shadow Pines. Shadow Lake was sold as a golf course and restaurant, Shadow Pines was not. Just, everything just didn't line up, and we were under the impression after we separated from Dolomite and everything that they would clear 4 years ago, and it didn't. 3 years ago, it didn't. 2 years ago, it didn't. 1 year. So we had lost a lot of business the first couple of years because people thought we were fighting the town. People thought we were going to close up. People thought all these things, and it was difficult. It was difficult, and it was just more of a out of principle lawsuit. I mean, it's the last thing I'm going to do because I don't want to spend money with attorneys, and that's why I'm hoping we can.
And I say, I
Come
think
together with
both
something.
parties
I really-
are trying
I
to
really
work-
do.
Yeah, both parties are trying to work to a conclusion.
Yeah, it's the last thing in the world I want.
Well, and I think also retaining the value of the property
Yeah.
for you. I mean,
Well, that's important. That
You
obviously
intend
is
to have a
important.
golf course for the foreseeable future, but
Right.
if obviously you see a loss of the value of your property, that's an impact to you, and
It's a huge impact, yeah.
so.
So we're just kind of doing it to protect ourselves, and we just didn't want to get surprised by anything. But I haven't heard,
No, I
you
think.
know, those things, they go so slow. I get
Yeah.
really impatient, and especially when I see the bills.
Well, we'll work towards it.
I love to work with the town. I mean, yeah, again, I'm really being honest. This is what our plan is, and we want to be here a long time. If the game of golf goes in the tube or the restaurant business, something happens, I can't answer that, but that's not the goal. And we're,
Well, is there anything that, in the context of our comprehensive plan, is there anything anything that the town could write into that plan that would help you guys? You know, what can we do to try to make your business more sustainable?
I mean,
We obviously want you to succeed,
it would be
too.
nice to have, I'd like to think Shadow Lake as a whole is a great asset for the town of
Yeah, we
Penfield.
want, definitely, I think so.
And I'm not sure how many people from the town board, or maybe they think Shadow Lake's a bad place because of Shadow Pines or because there's a lawsuit, but I would love to have a better relationship. Well, we have a great relationship, Jim and I, and we do. But I'm just saying, a more positive working relationship would be great. I'd love that. And again, I told you before, the last thing in the world we want to do is build 250 homes there. So,
Zip lining and platform tennis.
that's right, the zip line thing, that's right.
Jeez, don't cut those trees down.
The tubing hill is pretty busy over there at Greystone.
You know, it's funny, we were like, okay, you're gonna do what in the wintertime? Because they rely virtually 190-something% on golf out there in Greystone. They have a handful of weddings a year, and it's just the location is difficult for people to go out there. So the tubing thing's been great. They put a lot of money into it, and when they opened up, they had 1,000 people the first 2 days, 500 each day, sold out all February break week. So it's different, something different, and it's good. They're getting a lot of publicity, so we have no hills, so we can't do it.
We'll come up with something else.
Yeah, something else. We tried cross-country skiing a few winters through snow country, and there was a few winters there was no snow. I was like, okay, this is good.
That's the problem, you know.
The weather dependent, it's tough.
Diving.
It's tough.
You're right.
What's that?
Diving.
We talk about doing
Yeah.
ice rinks and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
It's just not reliable in order to make it worth the effort.
Ice is extremely expensive, let's not forget that. Ice is very expensive.
No, I mean, if you can get
We had
people on it, that's
the
one
the
thing.
Penfield Fire Department there last Tuesday. They do an annual diving. They cut a hole in the ice on in the pond, and they do their diving, and the troopers come one time a year, and they always get all the golf balls for us. So they bring up 1,500, 2,000 golf balls. I'm like,
Training for them and.
yeah, train for them.
15 or 20
Cold
across
weather.
line.
Well, it's probably not the muddy, murky stuff you're used to swimming in anyway.
Yeah.
on in there.
Yeah. It was pretty neat to see them though. The people having dinner was a good show for them. Looking out the window.
Yeah, if I hook
Seeing
right,
everything,
it
so.
ends up in that pond.
Guarantee it's in the water.
So yeah, anything else? I hope I'm not rambling on too much.
No, it's very
Give you a little
good.
history of it.
Appreciate
So,
it.
I appreciate the time here. I really do.
Thanks for coming in. We do appreciate, we know you're busier. In fact, he's wanted to come in 3 or 4 times, I think, but there's always something thrown in your path.
Grandkids.
That'll happen every time.
Love it.
Get him to work out there.
Pick up the stones, right?
Yeah, pick up the stones. Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming in. We really
Okay.
appreciate it.
A lot of great information.
I'll let you guys go.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Fritz.
much. I appreciate it.
Favorites?
Thanks, everybody.
See you soon.
All right.
Just for coming, right?
They had a copy of the agenda, so we can talk on their behalf. They gave us a letter of intent and mapping that we can show the committee tonight. So we can
Yeah,
move
why
on
don't we
to
do
next
that for
topic.
you? Yeah.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
So we have 2 items that we were talking about, right? You gonna talk about the other one?
Well, yeah, we have two rezoning requests that were received since we last met. One was provided in the email that we sent to you guys, and Doug, if you could pull up the map they provided, we'll start there. And I'm not sure how many people are familiar with this project, but it's something the planning board's been, has approved an overall plan for in terms of the amount of square foot. It's called Panorama Park. It's a professional business park. They are in the limited industrial zoning district. It's outlined in the yellow area, in the yellow boundary that you see there. Currently, we've had 2 projects come in already within Panorama Park for a 40,000 square foot office building and a 14,000 square foot office building within the blue area on the map. And what they're coming to us now, to this committee to ask for a request and a recommendation of you, is a recommendation to rezone what is LI in the front area that they're pointing to with the white circle call out, and to rezone it to a GB. GB is adjacent to it on all sides.
Popeyes.
Yep, Popeye's the first, the car dealership across the street, hotel on the other side of 441. Part of their letter of intent also states that they do understand that the town is, has a history, or at least is, at this point has the opinion that we are pretty much set on car dealerships and automotive uses,
Well, let me just jump into that. That's a good segue.
because they do have something in their letter on
The
it.
property at one time was, a portion of the property was zoned general business. And the problem is that there was a lot of interest in putting another car dealership at that intersection, which the town was not excited about. So as a result, during one of the comprehensive plan updates, it was recommended that that property go to a limited industrial zone. It was also owned by Cybron, or by Nelson Monk at that time, which is now King Fisher. So we rezoned it to limited business to match the zoning for the factory and the rest of the property that they had. And that basically eliminated the car dealerships' proposals for that area. Since then, that site was identified as being a location for, in 2001. It was identified and approved for a hotel, which actually was started under construction. The utilities were installed. 9/11 hit, and the hotel industry went right down the toilet. And as a result, they stopped work on it. And the other problem that they had was one of the investors absconded with $13 million. So it kind of took the wind out of their sails in terms of being able to develop. But that left everything in a state of confusion as to what should happen to the site. Since then, they have started developing the office park. We initially thought they were going to utilize that portion as office space as well, but they would like to utilize it for retail sales as well, which they cannot do in the limited industrial zone. That is designed for manufacturing, office space, and hotels. So their intent is to try and request a rezoning to allow that to become a retail establishment of some type, or a couple. We don't know at this point in time exactly what. You should also know the town board, if they do rezone property, if you were to give them a recommendation, If they do rezone property, they do so based on the knowledge that they know it's going to be built there prior to rezoning the property, so they're not getting something down the road they don't want. So it's just a request on our part to you to see if you will make a recommendation to go back to general business.
Aren't we really short on industrial what was the other one, industrial manufacturing zone?
Light
Industrial.
industrial.
Limited industrial.
Aren't we
as well.
really short on that space in town though? I remember you guys talking about that.
I say the only industry we really have is LG Note, but LG basically says we have no plans to expand further, so the rest of it's being built out as office park.
You can actually see that Nelgy owned a lot of that property. Camp Ackermo's over there in the corner where the pond is, and then they owned all the rest of it, and they sold all that land off to the developers.
What did Hakamo do with theirs? Did they do
They-
that dog park I think they were gonna do, or?
It's part of this project called
Yeah,
Panorama
it's
Park.
part of this project.
It's been incorporated into it, so
If you go back to the Panorama Park map,
Dutch Summers and Rich LaFroy bought up all the properties. They were separate. There was a piece owned by Del Monte. It was an odd shape along 441. There was the Camp Ackermo piece that was broken up into several different parcels. So they incorporated all those into one ownership now. So now with all the,
So what are they gonna do with the pond?
it's still, it's
pond
part of,
stays.
yeah, it's still part of the property that's under Rich LaFroy and Dutch Summers property, but it also acts as a spot for fire. So LG Nunk has a lease over the property, so they can
Okay.
pump out of it if they ever need
I got you.
an excessive amount of water quickly
Right.
for, if they had a fire or something else. So it's still on the Panorama Park property, but they do have rights of use of it for fire if they need. So there's pumps in there and everything else that they can pump.
So we can stay a private pond?
Buffer.
It'll always stay a private pond.
And there's no development proposed down at that portion where you can see the old Camp Ackermo buildings. They're not intending to
They
build
put their
anything.
pond there actually.
Yeah, the
Right.
new development has located their pond down there as part of the stormwater treatment phase 2 compliance and all the stormwater. They've kept the standalone pond for the firefighting separate.
What would the, if it were converted to retail there, which frankly I would be happy to see, what would be the likely way that that would be safely accessed from the adjacent roadways? How would they do that?
There's actually 2 access points. There's one is Panorama Creek Drive that has a traffic light on it. So up here, Panorama Creek Drive, there's a traffic light there now at
Okay.
LG Nunk's entrance. There's a drive, an access drive that they recently reconstructed right behind Popeyes. So you can go to the traffic light and then
Okay.
come in behind Popeyes. And
Doug, you know,
there's a new access drive as well
go back to
as...
the, just right in that yellow boundary that's on the map is the drive Mark's talking about, coming off Panorama Creek.
And then there's another right in, right out access that they're going to put off of Panorama where that red line is, next to Popeyes. Won't allow a left out, but they'll have left in, and right out from there at that entrance. So there'll be 2 separate ways to get into that property, and then obviously any development would, whether it fronts on Panorama or not, would access off of those.
With traffic lights?
They're not going to put another traffic light. There's the one at Panorama
Just the
Creek.
one,
Yeah, because
okay.
you have another light at the intersection of the expressway, so to
Right.
add another one
You got
would
the on and
just
off
be
ramps there.
Okay.
unnecessary.
Yeah,
Those two will be
that's
timed
right.
accordingly.
So if you want to make a left out of there, you would go behind Popeyes, Panorama Creek Drive, and you can make a left at the traffic light. So you can allow like a right in, right out of that, that's right there now. So that would be their second means of access. The main traffic light piece would come off that Panorama Creek Drive, but they've already developed that roadway in the back.
And the road internal of the project site is being built as a town dedicated road, which is why you see, can you go back to the plan, Doug? That red boundary that you see,
Uh-huh.
that follows what is a roadway, they've installed that already.
Okay.
That's why they've been able
You
to
can
go
drive
in.
up there if you want.
Very active construction site, I wouldn't exactly
Be careful.
recommend people
Yeah,
going
yeah,
up there.
yeah.
We're still doing a lot of inspections, so.
I should say you can,
Watch yourself as
you
you're-
can physically go up there if you want.
I'd say watch yourself. It's still not dedicated,
actually-
it's not dedicated to the town yet, so they're in the
Yeah, it's still
process of
privately
doing that.
owned.
So we'll just backtrack on
Yeah.
that one. But yeah, that's gonna be a
Okay.
town dedicated road, just like other, commercial drives or commercial roads in town. So, the request is obviously for GB up in front because that has the most view to the public driving by. Again, similar to the nature of the area around it. And we wanted to bring it to you guys tonight to hear your thoughts and any concerns about it, if any, or what your recommendation would be.
So I guess my concern is you've got a giant retail center right next to it that's already got a number of vacancies. Now you're gonna put something brand new. Who's gonna wanna go in the old half-empty place? And then what happens to that? It's just a big eyesore that sits vacant forever.
Well, we don't know how they want to build that out yet. You know, it could be different. GB offers so many different things that may not fit well into Panorama Plaza. So they could bring things in there like, you know, detached restaurants. It still could have medical office components. You could have different retail components to it. It's not to say they're going to build like a strip plaza there. Plus, I guess a lot of people are looking to kind of have their own standalone building, so they have more marketing to it, whatnot, for visibility.
As Jim said, this would just be a recommendation from this committee that it's possible to go GB. The town board won't rezone the property until they know what that use is. If they said we're gonna put another strip mall, then the town board would say, yeah, no thanks.
Okay.
That's not what we're looking for, and like you said, we've got it next door. If they say we're coming in with 5-10 years from now, who knows what it is, we've got Bouncy Pillow World or whatever is the rage at the moment, yeah, that makes sense, let's go ahead with that. So it would be a recommendation from this committee that, yeah, it may make sense and gives more flexibility to the developer to do something. They would come before the town board and say, here's our use, here's what we want to do at this time, it's recommended in your comp plan that it's possible, would you consider rezoning? The town board said, yes, we'll rezone for the use that you're specifying. We may not want to rezone it if it is going to be another strip mall or a mall or, whatever is, not in fashion at that time. So as Jim said, the town board, would look at the comprehensive plan recommendation, but wouldn't rezone it to a use that, they weren't looking for at that time.
And the entire parcel is only like 7.5 acres,
Not
right?
very big, right?
And
The
so-
area they're requesting, yes.
Yeah, and so just that strip really kind of along the front that shows to the road, you're probably talking like 3 or 4 acres.
Well, the overall property is bigger than that. I think it's 7 acres is this general business piece. As you go up the hill, it's, what was the total, 60 acres? It's like the total encompass of all of that yellow property, I think is like around 60 acres is the overall piece.
But I mean, basically, the piece where you would have visibility, where you would be likely to put the kind of retail that, Mike is referring to, stores and whatnot, is,
You've got that short little bit
Pretty small.
of panorama frontage, and then obviously
Yeah.
you'd have a little bit behind that.
Right.
Obviously, you're on the 441
It's just a
on-ramp
few
there, so
acres.
you could see if it was a hotel or if it was something
Yeah,
similar to the other
It's hard to
side.
see this, but there's a grade change here, you're along you start seeing where the trees are, a lot of that's not gonna be developed. But you're right, I think you're looking at probably 2 or 3 type of standalone buildings of some type. I don't think you're gonna see a strip mall.
And it's got quite a bit of elevation once you kind of get beyond that, and I think that's why they decided that was the end of their line.
Is that where they were gonna do the hotel back in there?
Yeah.
It was the Hilton Hotel at the time. Actually, the parking lot was in...
They said the mulch was catching on fire, right?
There was, no, you're talking Ellison Heights, but it wasn't on fire, it was just the steam that comes
Well,
off.
that's what I meant, but
But,
that's,
no, Ellison Heights is on the other side, that was as you go up Penfield Road, off to the right, Ellison
that's
Heights.
not the same, that's not connected to that?
No,
No.
no.
Okay.
Very,
Ellison Heights is over right there. That's the one you'd go up Panorama Trail, they actually put a sign on it, said the most pipe's not
Yeah,
on
that's
fire.
it, yeah. But that was,
Please stop calling the
is
fire
that where the
department.
old Della Petra masonry supply was down there? I'm trying to remember.
That I'm not sure.
ask him.
No, I don't remember that either.
They used to sell plaster in there. They used to go in there. You turn in that road, they went up that hill where there's a chain around it, across it now.
It's the Oscar DeBrizo property?
Yeah, it might have been there.
He's on the far end, over by Old Quarry Lane, was, Oscar Breeze property, house is right there.
Thoughts?
So,
Supportive, not supportive?
again, this
Show
is
of
a
hands.
recommendation to the town board, and the town board would,
Well, if we make a recommendation, do we want to make a recommendation about what the use would be?
I don't think you have enough information to do that. It's gonna be market driven based on how it gets built out.
I would say though, you're kind of on the right track though, because what you might want to make if you're going to make a recommendation for rezoning, you might want to make it to the subject to, there are certain uses that they didn't want there initially, like car dealerships.
They acknowledge that in their letter of intent though.
But I mean, I would say you'd want to make a recommendation to the town board that anything they do, or anything that's developed on the site, we would be consistent with, the properties around it, not be something that would, cause some type of a problem or some type of visual problem for the area or traffic problem for the area. You may not want to put a funeral home on that site because if you had a police officer or a fireman pass and 8,000 people showed up to support the family, that would be a disaster.
Well, and also to Mike's point, when you've got Panorama Plaza with empty stores in it, something that, not another strip mall that directly competes with
Right.
a half-empty
Right.
mall.
And that's a good point too, is because there's something going on with Panorama Plaza that's just not normal. It's almost like, it's not true, but it's almost like they're encouraging people not to be there for some reason or another. They don't have a broken heart when somebody says we're leaving. Maybe they've got a plan where they're gonna do something and combine a lot of the storage or something of that nature, I don't know. They did put in a nice little pizzeria down there. I don't know if anybody's been down there recently, but a few weeks ago, they put in a new pizzeria called Forno de l'Art.
Yeah.
It's pretty good, so, hopefully some things are coming back there, but you're right. It's
So,
kind of
Kaz,
a
would
weird
it
situation.
be fair for me to sum up what you said about the traffic concerns as something with a non-peak traffic flow, like a funeral home, where we're getting a sudden rush of cars to one spot at one given time?
Or just make a statement to the fact that the town board should be very judicious as to how it determines what the appropriate uses for that area are if it's intended to rezone the property. Something where you just want them to think about the fact that not just anything should go in there.
I think it's reference, the letter itself references kind of, don't worry, you're not doing a car dealership, but I think it'd be worth noting, not doing something akin to a strip mall that would compete with Panorama, since we don't want that mall to go out of business or.
So similar to some other rezonings that we've done in the past, town board would take a look at it for the use before it goes to planning board for site plan.
They would have to come in with a full-blown plan as to what they were gonna do with the property in order to get the rezoning. The other thing too is you don't want disrupting the operations of Thermo Fisher, and you certainly don't want them disrupting the traffic flows from the office park, because that is right now the only way out of the office park.
With those being said, we'll show of hands of anyone who will ask for supportive of rezoning. Great job.
Are you a partner here or something?
You don't know my dealings.
I better.
I do with my money what I choose.
Uh-huh.
Conflict of interest, conflict of interest.
These guys are mine, don't worry.
I don't get raises. It's all Bitcoin. Alright, that wraps that one up. Jump over to Shoecraft. We have like a bit of a, I'm gonna call it like a little anomaly that's been sitting on state plank and Shoecraft for several years, and I'll let Jim give a little bit of history on it.
Well, you can see that there's it's that property where the curve is going through. It's a triangular portion. It's like an infill. You can see that in the last comprehensive plan update, we'd had requests from neighbors who already had half-acre lots along the frontages of Shoecraft and Plank, requesting the town to rezone their property to R120 from RR1 because they were considered to be pre-existing non-conforming and had to come in every time for any kind of a modification to the house or to the accessory structures. So in 2010, I think it was 2010, I might have gone back to 2000, but I think it was 2010, they did grant rezoning to those properties you see in gray. abutting the ones on the south side of Plank Road, which I believe is where Crown Point is being constructed now. Recently, we had a developer come in who's interested in that property. What is it, 1346?
1345.
45. He's interested in developing that site as half-acre development. The site actually is wooded, but it's fairly dry, although some neighbors will tell you they've had some water problems in their backyards. His intent is to solve that problem. He's got two means of ingress and egress. Where were you? Yeah, he's got one there.
Well,
There's three. He's got one over here on Plank Road as well. So there is accessibility to the site. It is an infill parcel, so you know the neighbors have been looking at trees and open space for the last 40 or 50 years. I'm sure they're not going to be real happy about that, but he could develop it as a Town Law 278 where he could get a number of units in there. And I think his intent is to cluster, actually. I don't think he wants to have them.
I believe his proposal was to do like duplexes using 278 to cluster with townhomes.
So if you were allowed to have, I don't know how many acres are on this thing. But, yeah, it's, so it's 14, so theoretically right now he could have, you'd say 14, but he couldn't have 14 units because you still need to put a road system in and some other things. So let's say we'd be able to have 10 units or 12 units. He would then propose to cluster those and have duplex units instead of single-family detached. He'd have 2 units tied to one that would look like a house, but he would have,
A lot less land disturbance.
and he would have like five or 6 of those instead of 14 or 12 of whatever he was doing.
What are those parcels there off of State Road, is it?
Those are zoned R1. Anything that's green,
Are there structures in there? I can't.
yes, there are houses on each one of the 4 here. I think the other one, is there a house on there?
On
933?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that's Pauline's.
They're all,
It's
they
Pauline's
were,
house.
these were all before RR1, weren't they?
Yeah, because Pauline here
Yeah,
at
the whole
933
town-
bought 2 half-acre lots, subbed it in,
Up until 1981, the
Yeah.
entire
sub it.
town was basically zoned half-acre development. And it went to 1 acre because of lack of sanitary sewers or wetland issues or whatever the case may be. With the RR1, when the sewers, it was determined that when the sewers came back in or had ability to come into the area, the town would consider rezoning. A lot of the areas have never had the ability to have sewers come back in some cases they have. This area here, I believe, is serviced by sanitary sewer now.
Didn't go to Plank.
All the units there are half acre. And you can imagine what it was like back in the day, if your septic system failed on those lots that are all next to each other, everybody's backyard is one gigantic leach field, which is not a good thing. So it's just as well if they did get sanitary sewers in that area, because if they hadn't, sooner or later there would have been some problems. So it's kind of a strange situation. Right now they'd be allowed to have maybe 10 to 12 units under RR1. If they go to half acre, they'd then be able to have 24 units maybe, or 22 units or something like that, which would then put him into a
Probably 20.
Yeah, probably
With
20.
stormwater,
20.
with stormwater and everything.
If you were to build 10 duplex units under the cluster situation, he could preserve some treed areas. We haven't even seen a real plan yet for what he wants to do, so I couldn't even tell you how he'd lay it out.
Questions?
See, we own the development rights on 900 State Road, that's the Dominican parcel.
Right.
So we own the development rights on that piece.
On which piece, Mark?
The
That big
large-
one right here?
Just to kind of give you
Oh,
context of
okay.
what could be developed on it, we bought development rights under the open space plan for that. But it's the Dominican parcel.
Up until right now, there hasn't been any real pressure for development of that site. As a matter of fact, I've never even met the owners.
But we
It's the
have had,
Gasberry family.
we've had several people ask about it.
They have,
Aren't the
but-
family. At least once a year somebody asks.
You know, it's a perfect example of people who may not want development in their backyard. They should get together and buy the property. I mean, if they really have a concern for it, maybe they don't. I don't know. I've never talked to anyone about it, but it would be a great opportunity for them to be able to buy it all and extend the property lines so that they all get a piece of it.
Would the town make a buffer? If you put some,
With the cluster layout, that's
Yeah.
what it would be, part of that would be included in it.
so we'd have to buffer with the existing homes.
Yeah, you try to pull the houses away from that, because if you went with the conventional, with with a non-cluster, then you're building out to the property lines and you're basically taking everything down.
Time you put a road in, you're not gonna have a lot of space before you're backing up to one side of the neighbors currently or the other.
Right, I mean,
Somebody's gonna be mad.
well, also, I mean,
Somebody's always mad.
someone's always mad, that's the reality of our world.
It's true.
But, eventually, a lot of these are deciduous trees, so leaf-off condition, even if you left 50 feet of tree, you're still gonna see through it at some point during the year.
Can you go up to Abington and Barkley? It's the same guy. So you can see, he did leave a row of trees
Mhm.
between that project. That's his right there. But again, it's what
actually-
you have to work with. You don't have that much.
It's not that
But
much.
that's surprisingly more wooded than it looks actually when you drive past it. But that is something the board, in this case, it would be the planning board looking at that site plan review if it went through that. And that's something that they would stress.
What would the, what would the access and egress from a cluster, I mean, like, I know you guys can't say exactly where the cluster would be, but
Yeah, we don't know yet, but he does have defined areas where you could bring in access. One is over on Shoecraft there, right there.
yep.
Another one would be down behind the fire hall here at that point. But he's got that whole area along State Road that he could open up. Hopefully, he would not put a road between any of those houses there. A lot of it depends on though site distance and all sorts of goofy
You
things,
gotta
but,
figure out where you're gonna locate your pond and
right.
figure out where your utilities, where you're gonna connect the sanitary sewer.
They're gonna wanna minimize the amount of road they put in just for cost anyways,
That's a good point. Where's the sanitary?
all around it.
Well, it's
You
on,
go across Plainview,
actually,
you go
no,
across
it's
state.
right there is where he would
Pull
tie
off of there,
in.
or you pull off the
Because he
state.
doesn't have to go into, underneath the roads to get to it.
Yeah, so you go north.
Shoecraft's the slowest speed road too, so you can likely.
Now, does the,
Plant's
do the,
40.
does the public, do the homeowners at all who live in that sort of backwards L there, before the town determines if they want to change the zoning on this, or that they're willing to change zoning on it, do they get to sort of weigh in on it or not?
I would think that areas, now, you guys have not done, you haven't had to do much in terms of rezoning recommendations, which is good, because we don't want to do a lot of rezoning recommendations ever. But I would think that in this case, with the ones that you're offering, we would probably want to contact everybody to let them know that there's something going on with respect to the public hearings for the comp plan, so they can see in the comp plan that there's something that's been recommended that they should know about, and then let them kind of wrestle through that as they go through it. I would prefer that happen than going through each rezoning at one time, having to fight through all this with everybody, and then not having them know what's been going on for a year before rezoning is proposed for one of these properties.
Because to your point, Jen, they may want to, create a fund. and-
Right,
Or
right.
find a benign sort of person who wants to just come in and salvage that land or something like that. So
Absolutely.
And they would need time to put a deal together.
Right. And I don't know if I don't think he's done anything in this regard yet. He hasn't made an offer yet.
He doesn't even have an offer or anything. He's just, they're looking around for properties.
But I think with the few numbers of rezonings that we've talked about recommending to the town board, it's not a big deal for us to contact the adjacent properties and say, hey, this has been proposed. We'd like your thoughts on it, and we're gonna have a public hearing on this at some point in time here. As soon as we find out when that is, you'll be notified. I didn't realize how big that property is that we have access to.
That,
Yeah. Is Jim Bauman farming that land now? Ross?
I believe so.
Mhm.
Somebody is, I don't know if it's Jim, but it would make sense, it's in his
Mhm.
backyard.
Yeah, Jim Bauman's farming it.
how would you recommend we proceed? Do you like a vote from the committee? Do you want to play it out through public hearings?
Well, if there's no vote, I mean, then there's no sense in contacting anybody because it's gonna stay the way it is. If there's an intent to look at the possibility of rezoning, then we would have to notify people. We'll have to do it in every case anyways, I think.
Thoughts? Questions?
Well, so the request came in from whom to rezone this, or to consider
The
rezoning?
developer of Abington and Berkeley Square.
Right. So if we were not here, if this was a year this committee were not meeting,
He would go right to the town board and
you would
request
go
it.
right to the town
Yeah.
board, and the town board then would presumably put in place the process of notifying.
No, there'd be a
Oh.
public hearing for it.
Oh,
Right,
yeah.
okay, so basically, if we just do nothing, then we don't in any way foreclose this guy's ability to go and ask for the zoning, and we also don't start a process with the homeowners where maybe
Mhm.
where maybe he'll just change his mind about it and find someplace else. where
Yeah,
he doesn't-
basically, if you don't do anything, he just
Screw it.
has to wait for a comp plan to be adopted, and really wouldn't pertain to him at that point anyways, because he'd be
Right.
left alone,
Yeah,
and then he'd come back in and ask the question.
It comes down to whether the homeowners hate you or hate the town board.
And then
That's why we
eventually
hate the
hate,
town board.
and then eventually hate
Good
us.
call.
It trickles down to us
No,
too.
you're absolutely right. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not making a statement for or against it, it's there.
I think you pass.
If he wants to make the effort to go through it,
I think
it's always,
we pass on this.
it's always tough when you have an
Yeah.
infill project, because you've got people that have been there for a long time.
Takes 3 hours to get through the public hearing, which we recently went through.
You know, and I don't know any of those people, maybe they don't care, maybe they care a lot, but if
But it
somebody
would
has.
seem to me you wouldn't want to make a zoning change on that that affects those people unless they had an opportunity.
Prior knowledge of it and,
The prior knowledge and an
Or-
opportunity to voice their
Yeah, so-
concern.
and
And
it's-
since whoever the developer is
Yeah.
doesn't own the property,
this is kind of different than all the other ones you've dealt with, because all the other ones were
Yeah.
kind of isolated and there was only one or two
Well,
people
it was also the
involved.
property owner
Yeah, it's
requested.
but it was
Yeah.
a property owner request.
But property owners have not requested this, I
Yeah.
mean, they just,
Yeah,
I say we
so I
pass.
say,
We pass.
yeah,
that's fair.
I leave it to Tony.
Group supportive of that?
yeah.
You could make your hand up fast enough.
Great consensus, team.
Very
Great
good,
consensus.
very good.
We like consensus. All right, that hits the things on the agenda. We are, as I said in the email, we're still working on the document. We did get through all the recommendations and edits that you guys gave us when it came back to the first time. We're now working on wrapping up the goals and recommendations of the committee, and we're hoping to have that to you for our meeting in March, on the 24th, as we wrote on here.
I say, we intend to have that out ahead of time. And
Yes.
Again, like last time, you have time to
Read it.
have your comments and notes, so when we come to the meeting productive, you've read it.
Give you at
and we
least,
can
5 days to a
Provide
week.
feedback.
And you're gonna give them the revised comments that they recommended.
We can provide the initial piece and then.
Yeah, that would, if I didn't.
Very good.
Still plugging through maps and tables.
So there's two things I wanted to make sure, though, that one we've definitely touched on, but I don't know, I'll just kind of mention it again. I'm looking at Heidi is partly what reminds me of it, that I was just super concerned when Heidi was talking about how essentially if farmers like Dave Woodward decide to pull up, say, he wins the lottery, he moves to Fiji, what happens to all that land that he's farming and all of that open space that can't be, that people like Heidi want to keep open in our community, agricultural land, but that based on the way things are organized now, it can't happen. So I just want to kind of encourage people to sort of be thinking creatively about that. And are there things we could do? Is there some research we can do to find out maybe if other communities have been in this situation, what have they done to make sure that that isn't such a looming possibility, right?
It is a burden, it's a unique burden to the family, because obviously what happened was money, public funds were given to them
Right.
for this land. So there's a public trust that if we gave you money, you've got to preserve the land in an agricultural state.
I don't think any of Dave's land is covered. by-
Dave's not.
No,
Dave,
no.
Dave did not do
Other
it.
people's.
Several, Bauman did it, the Beersley family did it.
Lots of families.
Oh,
Lots of-
Dominica, we just looked at Dominica's
Yeah,
property.
Dominica's did it.
You've got, off of Creek Street, we've got the Heinz property on Creek
Yeah,
Street.
there's several
There's
properties. I
pieces
mean, it
all
was
over.
$10 million that were expended for that. So the public trust is that if we give you money, you're gonna maintain it for what the purpose of the easement was. That's all well and good if you have a farmer that says, I'm in 100%, my kids will be in it 100%, but then you get to a point where nobody's in it for 100% or any percent, and now you got the land there,
It becomes vacant land.
and you can't use it, and you can't use it for agriculture because there's nobody there to do the agriculture. Now it starts to go into a state of fallow land. It starts to grow up as wooded area because nobody's cutting it back down again. There is a way probably out that if you were to remunerate the agency, I think it was the Farm Bureau, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't it, Mark?
You give us money back.
Well, that's what he said.
That's what I'm saying. If,
Families would have
I mean, that's
to-
not easy to do because obviously that money has been allotted out to a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, but they took the money.
You got the land, you didn't get the money. And
Well, and you gotta look at if it's $10 million back in 2000, now if it's 2020, 2000.
Well, it wouldn't have been 10 million for them, but let's say it was a million.
No, but I'm saying it was 10 million back then, you've gotta look at now
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Yeah, if everybody,
20, 25.
And then the
now
other part of it
it's-
is, the Farm
it's
Bureau would
dollars
say,
in
you know
different
what?
area.
We did this on the intent of having a permanent easement, which it says it is. We don't want to relinquish it. So I'm not quite sure how you would ever solve this problem. I mean, I think what's going to have to happen is somebody's going to have to be really creative. And you make a good point. What can you do to help the farmers or help the agricultural landowners? Maybe there are certain things of uses that would fall under the category as being acceptable
Well, ag and markets.
that currently aren't today. I mean, and I guess that's the point. What can you do? Maybe we need to do more research under ag and market laws as to what could be done there.
Well, that's why we
To
continually
accommodate
say we
the family.
support all
Yes.
uses under ag and markets law that.
Especially for these
allow-
conservation.
And you're right,
easements.
Don,
Allow
it's not gonna just
diversity
be
on
the
the
Rothers
property and
family, it's gonna
diversity in
be a
farming.
lot of families
Right.
down the road, because Dave does a lot of farming in this town. Dave's 65 or 66 years old now, he's my age, so he's not gonna be doing it forever, and I know his kids aren't like, all that excited about it, so we should start thinking about how do we deal with this issue when the time comes,
and we're
because
talking about the character, of the, part of our heritage,
Exactly.
the agricultural character of our town. I think all of us really appreciate. So that's why I just want to bring that kind of from the back of people's mind to the forefront of people's mind as we're going forward through this
Right.
last part of our process, to be creative, to do some research on the side.
well, that, and I don't expect you to do research, because that's not your function here. I mean, we could put you to work for the rest of your lives if that were the case. But I think the recommendations should come out from the committee to say, you need to look at this.
Well, I mean,
The
that's
town needs to be looking at
goals
this over the
moving
next
forward,
several
and that's
years.
recommendations moving forward, that this needs to be looked at, and that's something we can work on for the next 10 years and figure
Yeah,
out.
what's
you know.
gonna happen?
Well,
if
how do
or
we do
sooner,
that?
given the age.
Well, not saying that we have to wait 10 years to do it, but I
Yeah.
mean, that's a goal coming out of this.
Yeah, yeah.
This is
We should be looking at
to
it shortly
keep it as
after.
a.
How does solar fit into that?
It's a good question, because God knows everybody in the world wants to use every vacant field they can for solar. And in some cases, they actually have grown crops underneath the
Yeah.
panels.
Well, and there's also some new, I just recently attended some classes that there's, based on the governor's office, they're creating new siting committees that basically supersede town law. So they can come in, if it's a greater than a 25 megawatt system, they can come in and say, we'll handle the public hearing, we'll handle the process, and we'll distribute how some of these massive solar farms go into play. So that would even supersede our law. They basically take it away from the town, take away the town control and
Just
say,
like they
no,
do cell towers.
we'll handle it, because the governor basically, I think, says we're gonna have 70% renewable by 2030. Obviously, to do that, that's a whole lot of solar that's out there for that.
And have you been reading the stories about Rush, New York?
Yeah.
Where they're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of acres to be dedicated to
And that's,
solar fields.
I believe, through that siting committee that's come in and do that. So unfortunately, some of that, they take that control away from the town. They said one of the things is to have a sustainability law or a solar law, which we're working on right now, have something underneath that. They'll look at what you've got and say, okay, if it seems reasonable. They said basically an outright ban. They'll just say,
Too bad.
too bad, and we're gonna go do it our own way. If you've got some reasonable controls and some reasonable buffers and other stuff, they'll look at that and say, okay, that kind of makes sense, we'll follow what you've got. If you're too stringent on one end, they'll basically say, that's not doable, that's burdensome in their terms. or overly burdensome, we'll just do it our way. And so that's one of the things we're kind of looking at now is how do we find a middle of the road option that maybe people aren't 100% happy with, but it's better than the siting committee taking over somebody from Albany. So hereby we bequeath you with hundreds of acres of stuff in Raj, and guess what? Here's what you got, and we're the state, we're above you as the town, and you'll take what we tell you. And so that's
But
what's
in
going
your
on.
case, if they're willing to compensate you for the use of the land, which I'm assuming they are doing,
I mean, they're not taking your land, they're just
Yeah.
saying these projects are moving forward, and rather than getting mired in the town or small town government or other stuff that, you know, we're trying to hold them up or ban them altogether, they're just saying these projects are moving forward, they're not taking someone's land, they're not taking.
But they are state-backed
eminent
projects.
domain, yeah, but, I mean, you're still compensated as a
Yeah.
property owner, or you're in favor of it as a property owner, but they're trying to, say, fast
So
track
that would be one of the things we'd have to look at
as
as a recommendation to see how, and it might not be solar, it might be wind, it might be any one of a number of things depending on the situation, but
But if no one wants to farm it, and you don't want a
Yeah,
massive
you're right.
housing complex going there, and you don't want it to just be a wasteland, then
Right.
clean energy seems like it's something that should at least be considered.
And tie it, well, with CCA, if they're.
Yeah, it's going, where'd it go?
Find local clean energy.
Coached it out?
yelling on everything.
Yelling at,
But one of the problems that I've been working with Jim on is my dad's land, you know, the whole section, we need 250 acres, not all of it was purchased by the open. The section that was divided into 3 parcels. Those 3 parcels were divided amongst us children. I've got one of them, 66 acres of just open space. That's it. The boys got the land and the farm. So for me, I have 66 acres. I have no barn. So even if I decided to be a farmer, I would have to rent the barn from my brother to store my equipment. If my brother chooses to knock down, and the farm is actually on his land, it's not open land, but if he decides to knock down the barn, because it's crazy expensive, there's nowhere for me to build a barn. Same thing, my sister has open space, but no barn. So there's nowhere for me. I mean, me and my husband, we're teachers. We would love to work the land, but we don't have a tractor.
Can't do that.
We don't have one. That's all me going to my brother who's using them, or maybe they've decided that they're not using them to sell them because he's not a farmer. You know, so point is right now it's still my brother. But as we grow older and whatever he chooses to do with the land, I have no control over it.
Right.
So there's no land like Bowman. If you look at that piece of property, there's no farm on that land.
No.
So if Bowman decides to knock down his barn, that open space land, there's no barn on that land. So if somebody decides to come in, where are they bringing the tractor from?
Right.
Long
It's
drive.
all agricultural. You want to maintain it, but unless you own the land and you're living it, you don't know the obstacles that are being placed in front of you. Thankfully, Dave Woodard brings his tractors back and forth from Harris Road to work our land. You know what I mean? And I value my relationship with Dave. I'll do whatever I need to do. Can I do this? Yes, you can. How can I help? You know what I mean? Because I need him.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, me and my husband are constantly looking at ways. We love pumpkins, we love trees, we want to sustain it. But we would also like our own farm or our own barn. But based on the way it's zoned and the deal, there's,
Do they have the ability to have a barn for the farmstead?
Well, typically a farm area is permitted farm structures,
have
but we'd
to
have to look at your
read
easement
the
again.
individual easement.
We should do that.
Some of the
at some
easement,
point in
and to your
time.
point, to what you're
there is
saying,
one little property or there's one section off area that says homestead.
Yeah.
that's,
And I don't know if that is in there, if it's broken away. I know my dad wanted to build on that, and that was not an option.
At some point in time, you should come in and sit down with us for a few minutes and bring that document with you and we'll go through it.
Okay.
But it goes back, and it's not just you. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people out there Dave's taking care of. And Dave he's not gonna live forever unless he knows something we don't know. So, I mean, a lot of families are gonna have the same problem you're gonna have over the years. We thought it was a great idea to preserve land, and it is. But at the same time, if you're the owner of that land, you're basically able to do nothing with it other than farm it.
Very
It's-
handcuffed.
But you got paid for that, right?
You did. Well, her father got paid for it, but now you got generation after generation that's gonna pay for it
You
now.
still gotta pay the taxes on it from now until eternity, and if you can't generate an income off the land, then how do you pay the taxes?
And the last thing you want is the county of Monroe taking over the ownership of that land through foreclosure, because it's still off the tax rolls and you're not getting anything for it.
And not go through an endless auction loop,
But those
That's right.
like we've seen with one of the other properties
Right.
the county has taken.
But number one, bring in that document, we'll sit down with you and go through it. But you make a good point, and I think the recommendation is the town should be looking at what is an action item here to make sure that these lands stay viable, but they also, there's some profit out of it for you. And maybe it is sustainability, maybe it is the issue of solar or geothermal or
Or
God
the
knows
town do
what.
something to encourage somebody else to move to the area to be a farmer.
Yeah, some sort of incentive.
Aren't there many of them out there these days?
No, but there are people that want to farm, so.
There are, but it's, you know,
It's
wanting
hard
to
to
do it,
find.
wanting to do it and being able to do it are
Yep,
two different
two different
worlds.
Say the gentleman that owns Sunscape is about the youngest
Yeah.
farmer that we've seen.
Yeah.
that's
And he
come
doesn't
out.
want a big farm.
No,
Every time I think of that, I think of the old show, Acres, when.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting, I'm not
Yeah.
suggesting.
That's what you think about, but it's not that easy of a life, and not a lot of people want to do it anymore. But if you could find people to do it,
Yeah.
and maybe that's another action item, you know, work through the Farm Bureau,
See
work
if you can
through
find some-
Monroe County Cooperative Extension,
But I think
see if there are people out there that would be
supporting
willing
ag
to-
and markets of
Yeah.
the flexibility of farming, we've seen,
Right.
I mean, everybody's diversifying. You got Bauman's, I mean, he's not just a row crop farmer, he also has greenhouses and sells flowers and pumpkins and
Yeah.
seasonal things. You've got Wickham's, you've got, you know.
He's got a
even-
full farm market. yeah.
Even Dave Woodward is
Yeah.
growing, you know, Christmas trees now. He's not, you know, people, you're diversifying the best you can.
Well,
to-
agritainment. sort of,
Right.
which
I mean,
is
that's
sort of what
that's
the
one
word
portion of
is.
it, but I mean, just
Yeah.
having an opportunity, shoots, they, you know, they have, you know, all sorts of different products at their
Cidery.
cidery, and they're looking to, you know, they've added a little parking lot on the north side to make it, you know, better for people to
You pick.
yeah, you pick cherries and fruits and everything else. So, you know, all the farmers are looking for other opportunities to keep their businesses solvent as possible.
So that actually brings me to my second thing that I think we have to, I don't think we've really talked about in here, but that's like a kind of a intersection of farming and light industry, which is what's going on in Webster now, where land that was, you know, row crop sort of agriculture, businesses want to move in and build not just kind of conventional sort of hoop house type greenhouses, but sort
Large
of
scale.
100,000
Large-
square foot buildings, right?
large scale buildings for, you know, for sort of hot houses, if you will. But they're huge, they're more like an industrial building, but they're being used to grow crops, so they're sort of really agricultural.
But it's
So
industrial agriculture.
what are they? So I think we need to be thinking about that in terms of our comp plan too, like what, that would certainly be a use for a piece of land, but does that sort of still fit in with the agricultural notion? And is it better to have it doing something or nothing? But if you moved out there to be out in the open spaces, do you want to be across the street
Right.
from a sort of a factory? So
Right.
I'm not trying to
It's the
propose a
it's the
solution.
balancing act that we play every day.
I'm
And it would
just
be
saying
interesting to
that
know
I
if
think
it-
this is going to be more of a thing, and I
Yeah.
think we have to anticipate this.
Well,
and
I
put
think it
this in
comes down to our
plan.
definitions, and that's what, something that Kaz has always been looking at, is the definitions in our zoning code, to either support the first part we were talking about with ag and markets, or, I'm not speaking for anyone here, encourage or discourage this industrial level agriculture, and that comes down to how our definitions are written.
I've been thinking of the same way you have, though, since this came, I have the plans upstairs, as a matter of fact, if anybody wants to see them, you're more than welcome to take a look at that lettuce factory in Webster. You cannot believe how big the buildings
Huge.
are. You're talking 50-acre building, that's just one, there's
4
many of
million
them.
square feet.
But it'd be interesting to see how they would interpret that use on your property with the Farm Bureau easement on it for agricultural use. It'd be interesting to know if they would support that or say it's more industrial than it is agricultural. They might say, yeah, we would buy into that as an agricultural operation. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's what I'm just saying, we really got to be open to that and look into it. It could be somewhat of a panacea and save some of this land, or it could be you know, the worst thing. Or it could be, if it's done thoughtfully, it could offer both, with
Right.
enough buffers and enough setbacks from the road and enough
Yeah.
restrictions on how many hours a day trucks can go in. It could solve a lot of problems, but if done badly, it could be
Real
terrible. But I really think it is coming, and we really need to be prepared and incorporate it into our thinking in the plan.
That application that you referred to is currently in court. The neighbors did sue the town on an Article 78 proceeding for, have it overturned. I don't know where they are with that right now. Have to find out though and see what's going on there, but,
In Article 78, that's just in the early stages at this point.
yeah, yeah.
And we can see the lights from the tomato factory
Oh, I
at
bet.
night from our house.
I bet, I
So,
believe it.
Can't imagine
And that's
living
only
next to a
half
lettuce
built.
factory.
That thing is only half built. And let's take it one more step. If New York State approves marijuana, you can bet everybody and their brother is gonna wanna build some kind of facility to accommodate the growth of marijuana year-round. I'm sure lettuce would be the least of our problems at that point in time. You'd have to start now thinking about all these people coming in from out of town wanting to utilize all this open space to develop these farm,
It's actually a little similar to how solar has been for us lately. We get a call to say, can we do this?
yeah.
So
And you
can we go
can.
back to the Shadow Lake for a second?
Yeah.
When we fought the battle for Shadow Pines not to get developed, it was a pretty resounding answer from the town, I think, not to develop it. So I would think that if, for some reason, which we hope doesn't happen, the golf course goes under, people are not gonna wanna see that developed either. Is there anything in the comp plan that we can do to encourage the town to negotiate with the golf course now in good
We
faith?
don't know what to do with this land at this point in time. We're just figuring out what to do with the land that we have.
No, I'm not talking about purchasing the land, I'm talking about rezoning it.
The key is, remember, the key is, and he sat here, and Dolomite has sued towns downstate because of this, and won. Cannot take away the value of their land.
He also sat here and said that it's their life dream to make this work,
And
so
it probably
it
is.
just seems like this
But
would
if
be.
it doesn't work, if you get another Dave
If it
Woodward
doesn't work, then
situation,
there's the value.
there's the value, and you gotta keep the value, because if you take their value away, we will be in court with them in 2 minutes, as other towns have been. There's case law about Dolomite won a case downstate where they got damages, all their legal fees were paid for by the town, and there was no rezoning, and there was no this or that. They won everything. You've gotta make sure, I think what's gonna happen is we will work with them.
It seems like they're in a position now where they would like to negotiate.
No, they're in a position right now where they don't wanna do
He
anything.
said, I mean.
They wanna leave it just the way it is.
If you want to rezone it to townhouse or something else where he retains his value, yeah, he doesn't care if it's single-family, duplex, MR, whatever, but he's certainly not going to take a rezoning to butterflies and, birds and butterflies.
Our intent
He
is
said
to
that.
try and get them at some point in time to develop a portion of the property with a higher density on one portion of it, and then leave a lot of it open space, and allow you to do that.
I mean,
But to tell them that
They've already
they're gonna
started
rezone, we're
that.
gonna rezone their property to a lesser use than what they have now, and take their value away,
Which is not.
We're not gonna do
Which
it.
is not what I said, Jim. What I said is there's something that we can do to show that in the comprehensive plan, I mean, we're talking a 12-year plan, not tomorrow, that would show that we would like to encourage them to, one, stay in business, and two, not to develop that. I don't know, maybe there's nothing.
No, I see what you're saying, and I don't disagree with it. I think that
It's a
12
line,
years is a long ways away, and who knows what's gonna happen with the world 3 years from now,
Right.
let alone 12.
But our mission
I would
is
say that you,
12 years from now, where we want to see that. And I'm gonna guess that everybody in most people in Penfield in 12 years would like to not see that developed.
but it may be developed though, that's the
Oh,
problem.
is there steps, well, all I'm asking, I'm ignorant to the process.
We could buy the land,
Is there-
they're gonna sell it for $10 million.
Is there steps that we can do, short of buying the land for $10 million, Jim, that would show in good faith that the town would like to see that continue? Can we support them through
Well, you could make it
infrastructure improvements? Is there other things that we can do to keep that business going?
they have all the infrastructure they need. I mean, really,
well, I think
the
we gotta-
document, all you're gonna say is we support this land use on this property as
Okay.
it is. And we want to continue to see them be successful and promote the relationship with the
So then
town.
that would answer my question, is that something we can do?
Sure, you can make
It's just basic
recommendations. to that
language.
effect.
I mean, if we all
I mean,
agree.
the way to keep them successful is to support them, I mean, go there.
If I played golf, I'd go there every day.
Yeah, but I mean, even just
Not
go for
very good,
dinner.
so.
I mean, going for dinner helps the
Right.
thing. I was there for dinner the other night. I was the only person in the place on a Tuesday night. There were people out playing platform tennis and doing other things, but you gotta support a place in order to keep
So
it.
is it something as a committee that we could make that kind of a recommendation,
Absolutely,
be it general in the,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's a couple lines and you kind of just, you're looking at,
Town is supportive of this remaining a golf course, would like to see it remain as such for the foreseeable future. I mean, that's just, general.
and I think also recognizing what an asset it is to the community, so that maybe that would help Odenbach's feel a little better that,
I would take your wording, and I'd even add on to it to the fact that if there were other uses, if there are other uses that could
To
be
keep
put on
them
the property
viable.
to preserve open space where possible, that's not a problem either.
well,
because
also just to
You
make that
could use
viable.
incentive zoning to do that. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
that would be the incentive to open
think
that
that
area for the public. And I think
Maybe
he's
make
right.
them feel a little better about the
Yeah,
relationship with
absolutely.
the town. and-
Yeah.
Well, the first thing is to end the moratoriums. That's the first thing, you make them feel better and then we move on from
Well,
there.
once the comprehensive plan is done, then the town board will lift the moratorium and
And where do we stand with Penfield Country Club, because that's the same issue.
With what?
It is a private course. They do have a membership, unlike Shadow Lake. They have a
So I don't think they're
membership.
booming though.
I think you can make similar comments, the same
Right.
with Shadow Lake.
Yeah.
Is the town supportive of it remaining a golf course, remaining,
We would like to see that
Space
remain
areas
as a
and-
golf course. We hope the town support, the townspeople support that.
I mean,
And,
at one point in time, they were talking about putting zip lines in the trees and doing other amenities on site to, again, try to diversify, just so they're not just a golf course. They were trying to do other things, so they can put comments in there. The town is supportive of, remaining a golf course and what other amenities, are needed.
but
on the
again,
site
that
to
could be
keep it.
utilized, if something happens where golf just goes away, that could be utilized as an incentive zoning program as well, to do something in some portion of the property that's isolated away from the neighbors and gives you a good buffer around the neighbors to keep open space. That's the one nice thing about incentive zoning, it doesn't really have any limits. You can do what you need to do the best you can for the community. But I think right now, other than your comment that you make for a recommendation, which I support wholeheartedly, I mean, who knows what's gonna happen, 10 years from now. There might be a solar farm out there or a, wind farm or something, who
I
knows?
thought you were gonna say a golf ball shortage or something.
No, there'll never be that, I don't think.
But isn't that the mission of our committee, is to try to figure out what we think's gonna be in 10 or 12 years and then
Well,
make
the
suggestions
mission
to
is,
the
the
land
mission
use
is to
towards
take
that?
into account, you got land that there may be issues with. How do you try and solve, or make recommendations to solve the issues if you can, yeah.
It's recommendations for the town board to consider that say, okay, we see these recommendations, concerns of the committee, let's put staff on this to hit that goal. Let's find a solution, let's work with that property owner, stuff like that. It's not your job to have the crystal ball of what it will be. It's your job to put forth that recommendation to say, all right, this is something worth investigating over these next 10 years. That's kind of the goal you're working on here.
We have large tracts of open land that may be subject to some kind of stress or pressure. In order to make sure those lands stay viable, we recommend the town do things to support the use of the property. If that's not the case, other issues such as open space preservation as best as possible should be done on the site. Those kinds of things. Those are the kinds of recommendations you probably want to make for those
Right.
kinds of properties. I think back to when cell towers first came here. That was the most traumatic thing that we had dealt with, because we didn't want to see 150-foot towers all over the town of Penfield at 2-acre or 2-mile intervals. But then again, the federal government made the mandate that you had to do it. You just have to site them properly, and if you want to do a little bit of landscaping here or there, which means nothing, because you're talking about a 150-foot tower versus a 30-foot tree. But, our generation, it was appalling to all of us to see those things go up, because nobody had ever seen them go up before.
Where do they get 5G? You got
Well,
poles
you're
every
absolutely
couple
right.
hundred feet.
You're absolutely right, because that's exactly what's gonna happen. And we've had that policy in town over the last 30 years where we try to do everything underground for these subdivisions. And now they're gonna be coming in with poles every few hundred feet, 500 feet, 800 feet to move 5G around. It's gonna be a little traumatic for people. The younger generation doesn't care because they want better service.
It won't be bad if you live in a
But to
neighborhood with
us-
street
I'm going
lights.
off the grid, I forgot to tell you.
To us, it is a little traumatic, you know?
We'll be all right if you live in a neighborhood that has streetlights, because you can use the poles, but
True, and luckily, we own the streetlight, a lot of the streetlights, so we can charge for those facilities. So, but it is gonna be a little traumatic. But,
I use smoke signals to communicate.
you know, God only knows what the technology is gonna be like in 10 or 15 years here. Who has a clue as to what it would be?
I'm gonna use that line. Put in the
What?
document. Technology, where will we be? Like a Star Trek line.
I think we see Jim Costello has no.
I think who has a clue would be a better.
I'm gonna use that too. Side
But yes,
question.
your point's well taken, and those are the kinds of things
on
we
the
should be
side.
putting into the document as it relates to trying to help these businesses to maintain themselves and be sustainable over the years and not have to worry about them failing and then have to figure out what are we gonna do with these lands. And same thing with your situation, how do you deal with, you know, making sure that these lands are still being viable and used for what their intent is, without hurting the owners in the process of doing it. So we'll put some stuff together for you, let you take a look and see what you think, and we'll edit as necessary and get to a final product for you. You spent a way longer time here with us than I thought you were gonna have to in the beginning, but we do appreciate you hanging in there with us, and I think we're almost there.
Any other thoughts for tonight? Alright, thanks everyone.
Get a chance, check out those public meetings that we were talking about on the 3rd, 4th, and 11th.
Just gonna reach out to
Next
him a
meeting
while
is
ago.
20.